Let's take a moment to celebrate bold new beginnings. The CEO chirped into his lav mic like he was announcing a damn gender reveal. 70 of us packed into the conference center. Bad fluorescent lighting, lukewarm coffee, and that tight-lipped HR smile that always means something's about to go sideways. Then he said it. We've made the difficult decision to streamline our operations. Streamline, that corporate colonic of a word. My name was fourth on the list, and we thank her for her years of service. But as we look ahead, we need to refresh our talent stack. I didn't hear anything after that. Just a hollow whoosh in my ears. My hands went cold like they always do when I'm about to either pass out or ruin someone's life. No warning, no heads up. Just a sudden ejection in front of 70 co-workers who'd watched me quietly hold together our most volatile, most regulated federal contracts for 15 years. I was the fixer, the late-night firewall, the one who made sure the paperwork danced just right so the feds wouldn't tear us to shreds. But to this new CEO, some LinkedIn golden retriever with a crypto hobby, I was just excess fat in a lean future. Someone clapped. A few others followed. Polite robotic applause. I think someone even said you'll bounce back. Bounce back from what? Body blow on company time. A decade and a half reduced to a line in a PowerPoint. HR handed me a branded stress ball and a cardboard box like I was going to cry and hug someone. I didn't say a word, just nodded once like I'd been dismissed from jury duty and walked out through the side door. But the elevator ride, that's where the real story starts. I pulled out my phone and logged into the compliance portal. Two-step authentication. Biometric thumb scan. Passphrase. Secure session initialized. I scrolled to Form 1916B. Responsible officer status change immediate effect. Clicked submit. A little pop-up appeared. Warning. Submission will initiate stop work order on all contracts requiring active compliance oversight. I hit confirm. Then the elevator doors opened and I walked out free. See what they didn't understand. What no one on that glossy leadership team even bothered to check was that I wasn't just the one who kept the files neat and sent friendly reminders about renewal dates. I was the named responsible officer on every single federal and defense-adjacent project they had legally on paper in systems in blood, and when a responsible officer's employment ends. Regulations say they have 24 hours to notify the oversight agency and trigger a mandatory stop work order. It's not optional. It's not up for debate. It's federal law. The kind with teeth and hourly fines sharp enough to gut a company in a week. But I didn't need to say that at the meeting. I didn't need to argue or cry or beg for dignity. I just needed to push a button. By the time I was in the parking garage, Char had emailed me the separation summary and a survey link asking for feedback on my transition experience. I almost laughed. I deleted it and turned off my phone. Let them enjoy the silence, because by the time they figured out what I'd just done, what they'd actually lost, it would be too late to fix it without me. And I wasn't feeling generous. By 8:47 the next morning, the first whisper came through Slack. Anyone else locked off Project Merlin? At 9:02, another pinged, this time from someone on the East Coast team. Fed cloud is down. Compliance flag on login screen. By 10:30, they pulled every engineer from federal and defense staged projects. Not paused, pulled. Entire dev teams were redirected to internal documentation review, which is HR code for sit tight and look busy while we beg legal for a miracle. The compliance dashboard, usually a sea of green checks that up like a Christmas stroke. Red, 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 non-compliant, non-compliant, pending RO reinstatement. It took less than 12 hours for the quiet detonation to ripple through the company's gut. At exactly 12:12 p.m., a very calm, very short email landed in the company's general counsel inbox. No logo, no fluff, just black Times New Roman and a single sentence from the Oversight Office. Your organization is no longer considered compliant for work involving federal or defense-linked contracts under Titles 48 and 32. There was no signature, just a reference number and a PDF attachment outlining the stop work order already in effect since 5:52 p.m. the day before, exactly 27 minutes after I'd stepped into that elevator and filed the form. That PDF included penalty accruals, $100,000 per hour, clock ticking. I, meanwhile, was at home in my robe, watching it all unfold like a slow-motion train derailment. Tea in hand, feet up, LinkedIn on fire. Notifications stacked like Jenga blocks. Sorry to hear the news. Let me know how I can help. Wait, did they really let you go? The WTF? Big mistake on their part. You always had the quiet superpower energy. Quiet, yeah, but not powerless. One by one, little pings came in from ex-goers, engineers, project leads, even a few PMs I barely tolerated, trying to be casual, trying to understand. Hey, so random question. Was there anything you were working on that would affect compliance? Hey L, do you remember who took over your part of the DD risk matrix? Hey, you wouldn't happen to still have access to the legacy portal for JCAT17, would you? I left them all on read. And I wasn't smug. Not exactly. Smug is what you feel when you win at trivia night. This was clean, cold justice. Not revenge, not sabotage. Just consequence. Quiet, elegant, inevitable consequence. Meanwhile, the company's public Slack channels were turning into chaos gardens. Developers arguing over access credentials. Product managers screaming about delivery deadlines. Someone tried to escalate to IT, but it just posted a screenshot of the compliance error message. Action denied. Responsible officer no longer active. No backup assigned. No backup because they never thought to assign one. And why would they? I'd never made a fuss. Never played politics. Never asked for title changes or company-wide shoutouts. Just did my job so well no one even knew how I was doing it until I stopped. Somewhere in a glass-walled corner office, I imagined the CEO squinting at that email, wondering how a $700 million company with next-gen scalability and enterprise resilience got kneecapped by a woman they'd labeled non-essential. The truth was dawning and fast. They didn't fire an administrator. They fired the keystone. And the thing about keystones, only notice them when the arch collapses. By the time Friday morning rolled around, the panic had started wearing dress shoes. At exactly 7:31 a.m., someone in legal sent flagged urgent asking why the governance risk and compliance system wasn't accepting credentials. They tried the admin override denied. Reset the GRC server cache, still locked. Even the root user was met with the same blunt slap of a message row access required for administrative override. Current responsible officer vacant. They assumed it was a glitch. They always assume it's a glitch. Like systems spontaneously decide to mutiny on payday. It tried rebooting the internal GRC node cluster twice. By 8:15, CTO waddled into the war room with half a protein bar in his mouth and announced to no one in particular. We revoked her credentials during offboarding. Soup then shrugged like it was all above his pay grade. He never even looked up from his phone. Legal didn't shrug. Legal sweated. They started combing through old contracts trying to trace where the digital tripwire got buried. A junior associate flagged something in the compliance charter. Some dusty PDF no one had read since 2012 and highlighted a single line. Only the named responsible officer may certify, modify, or deactivate the company's active federal compliance status within regulated systems. And just like that, the suits realized they hadn't fired a project manager or a glorified paperwork pusher. They had surgically removed the one person who stood between their company and a federal firing squad. By 9:12 a.m., I had 17 missed calls. 12 from HR, 3 from legal, 1 from the COO, the last one the CEO himself. All went unanswered. No voicemail, no text, just the rising temperature of their silence. They even tried to reset my GRC credentials manually. Didn't work. The system flagged the attempt as an authorized RORO replacement attempt logged and reported, which meant some lucky intern at the Department of Oversight now had a little red flag in their queue. A flag that said this company just tried to backdoor its own compliance. By 10:47 a.m. they stopped guessing and started panicking. The VP of Client Relations had to cancel a quarterly briefing with a defense subcontractor because the compliance badge on their shared portal had turned grey. Grey means uncertified and uncertified means non-billable. Contracts stalled, deadlines frozen, budgets bled, And there I was, still in my robe, stirring honey into my tea while CNN droned softly in the background. Every few minutes I refreshed LinkedIn and watched my old co-workers update their statuses with things like open to work and excited to explore new opportunities. Corporate speak for this ship's on fire, and I don't have a raft. They couldn't even email me directly from their work accounts anymore. My name had been purged from the contact directory like I was radioactive. But the real kicker, the compliance system still showed my ID as active pending confirmation. Not because they hadn't removed me, but because the system wouldn't let them. That's the part no one got. Firing me didn't undo my designation. They needed my signature, my voluntary signature, to finalize the transition. That was the rule. Not a guideline, not a suggestion, a rule. Until that happened, every government-tagged project they touched was poison. I took another sip of tea and turned off my notifications. They could scream into the void all they wanted. This wasn't my fire to put out. Let them sweat. At 11:42 a.m., the cascade began. Not a crash worse. A slow, grinding bleed as contract after contract slid into breach. The Defense Logistics Initiative flagged them first. Then 2 subcontracted aerospace firms and a sensitive R&D arm tagged under dual-use export controls. By lunchtime, 6 separate entities had issued formal notices of non-compliance. 4 others froze payment disbursements. 1, bless their promptness, went full scorched earth and invoked their breach clause. Just 2 lines. In light of the stop work order, Contract 445B is in material breach. All project activities are hereby suspended. Liquidated damages to commence per Section 9.2. Translation: you owe us money. A lot of it. The CFO, a cardigan-wrapped spreadsheet whisperer who'd always treated compliance like background music, suddenly developed a twitch in his left eye. He did the math, and then he did it again. By 2 p.m., his internal memo was circulating with the subject line: urgent fines echoing at $100,000 per hour, immediate action required. He even included a running clock at the top of the email ticking in real time. It was theatrical, desperate, and fully completely out of his control. They called an emergency board meeting, not Zoom, in person. That's when you know things are burning. I wasn't there, of course, but I have friends, quiet ones, who know how to forward emails without leaving a trail. Here's what I heard. The CEO kicked off the meeting, already sweating through his button-down, opened with a PowerPoint slide. Titled Operational Disruption Root Cause Analysis. The first words out of his mouth: this is a middle management issue. Blaming the middle, always the first move of a coward. He pointed fingers at the CTO. Should have known revoking her credentials would trigger a cascade. Legal, why wasn't there a backup RO in place? HR, who signed off on her separation without a role continuity plan. And even the procurement director. Why was she still named on that contract from 2015? Everyone else frozen because someone, probably the general counsel, just pulled up the compliance charter and read it out loud. Designation of responsible officer is non-transferable and irrevocable without written confirmation from the current design. In absence of such, all relevant contracts, systems, and certifications shall be rendered inactive until said confirmation is received and approved. That clause had my name on it, Inc. They had assumed wrongly that the role was ceremonial, a box-checking formality, like ordering lanyards or booking conference rooms. They didn't understand that I'd spent the last decade weaving myself into the DNA of every process that kept their million-dollar contracts federally blessed. And now the contracts were unraveling like a sweater in a washing machine full of scissors. The board asked one question, just one. Is there any way to reinstate her access? Legal paused, then said yes, and that but hit like a freight train with no brakes. She has to do it voluntarily in writing, and the system logs intent. If she's unwilling, reinstatement is blocked. Silence. I imagine the room smelled like dry erase markers, burnt coffee, and the raw panic of people realizing the house was on fire. And the only extinguisher had walked out the day before in heels and a smirk. And while they blamed each other, I was at home, finally calm, looking back on all the messes I'd quietly cleaned up over the years. The late-night audits, the red line emergencies, the shady vendor contracts I caught before they triggered Homeland Security alerts. The compliance nightmares I defanged before legal even knew they had fangs. I used to do it because I believed in the mission. Believed in building something worth protecting. But that belief died the moment they handed me a cardboard box and called it a refresh. Now the mess was theirs to mop up, and I wasn't handing them a single towel. At 6:17 p.m. that same day, while the board was still arguing over whose head should roll first, someone in IT tried to brute force a solution. They cracked open the GRC management console and attempted a forced update. Remove my name. Sign a new responsible officer from a short list of internal candidates who had the right buzzwords on their resumes, but none of the clearance history. The system let them think they were making progress. Drop-own menus responded. New names populated, but when they hit save, it blinked back one message in glaring federal gray. Transfer blocked. Active RORO must authorize change via signed certificate form 1916C. And underneath it, smaller text, unauthorized attempts to circumvent RO protocol will be reported per 48 CFR section 9.406. Legal court wind. Froze. Someone joked nervously about just photoshopping my signature. The CEO, red-faced and exhausted, looked up from his laptop and actually said it out loud, then forged her signature. I'm told the room went completely still. The general counsel, normally a soft-spoken policy nerd who wore orthopedic shoes and sipped ginger tea, looked like he'd aged 10 years and 10 seconds. His hands flat on the table, voice brittle as cold glass. That's a felony. A federal felony. Minimum 5 years. We're not discussing that again. No one spoke for a full 30 seconds, not even to cough. That's when it really sank in for them. There was no back door, no workaround. No we'll just patch it later fix. They couldn't reboot their way out of this. They needed me. Meanwhile, I was at home, calm as a cat in a sunbeam. I cracked open my laptop and logged into LinkedIn, clicked update profile, scanned down to current position. I hovered a moment and deleted Senior Compliance Officer at Redacted Corp, replaced it with a new title, Independent Compliance Consultant, Federal Risk Strategy Defense and Dual Use Regulated Systems. Then I added one clean line to the summary, currently exploring new opportunities, select engagements, only I didn't send it to anyone I didn't need to. Within an hour of saving, the views on my profile tripled by 10 p.m. 2 cold emails from private defense contractors. By morning, 3 more, all curious, all just checking in, all offering urgent advisory work on high-impact timelines. One of them even said, "Saw what happened. If you're the RORO everyone's whispering about, we need to talk." The whispers had started. Back at Redacted Corp, the delusion phase was in full swing. The CEO ordered PR to draft a statement. Something about unexpected regulatory turbulence and active partnership with federal agencies to resolve compliance hurdles. It was empty air. No one believed it. Contractors were already pulling out, sending polite legalese that translated to "call us when you can legally exist again." Inside the company, morale collapsed like a bad lung. Teams got reshuffled. Security clearance liaison were put on hold. Budgets went into freeze. COO tried to rally everyone with a company-wide Slack post about resilience through adversity. Someone replied with a GIF of the Titanic orchestra playing as the ship sank. It got 87 reactions. Meanwhile, the compliance charter clause, my clause, was now being dissected line by line by legal compliance, and 3 external consultants flown in overnight at God knows what cost. But the line they kept circling back to, all authority is non-transferable. Without direct participation and verification by the current responsible officer, whose intent must be unambiguous and willing. Unambiguous and willing, which meant that even if they got me on the phone, even if they begged, even if they offered to rehire me with fanfare and graveling, the system would still block them unless it was clear I was signing over my role voluntarily. And right now, I wasn't returning their calls. 8:09 a.m. sharp Monday morning, the Empire took its first real punch to the teeth. A $14 million contract, years in the making, months from rollout, and critical to the company's Q4 projections, was unceremoniously yanked by a government agency with all the grace of a guillotine drop. The official language was stiff and bureaucratic. Due to current non-compliance with RRO designation and oversight requirements, this office is terminating contract H number 8774 under clause 52.209-6. All further engagement is suspended until reinstatement is confirmed. Translation: you fired the only person who could sign off on this deal. You're now radioactive. Goodbye. The cancellation hit the executive suite like a pipe bomb wrapped in subpoenas. The CFO tried to put a spin on it, uttering about contractual delays and temporary hurdles, but no one bought it. Not the board, not the clients, and especially not the investors who'd already been circling like nervous hyenas since word of the stop work order leaked. By noon, shareholder relations issued an internal alert. The quarterly earnings call would be restructured to address regulatory turbulence. That's corporate, for we don't know if we're legally allowed to make money right now. At 2 p.m., I got the message. Not directly, of course. No one had the guts for that anymore. It came through Monica, a former colleague from Risk, who now consulted with a firm that happened to sit on the same contract that just evaporated. She'd always had a good head on her. We used to eat lunch in the supply closet when the cafeteria got too loud. She texted, "He wants to talk. Says it's urgent. Offered to make things right. Want me to pass you his number?" I stared at the screen for a minute, then typed, "Tell him I'm busy consulting." Then I deleted it. Instead, I just left her on read. Not because I was being petty. I was being precise. Because this wasn't about rage anymore. This wasn't vengeance or ego or some childish pissing match. This was power. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I wasn't the safety net. I wasn't the duct tape they slapped over holes to get through another audit cycle. I was the gate, only one, and I had the keys. They couldn't replace me. They couldn't fake me. And they sure as hell couldn't force me, because buried in that charter, the same one I rewrote 8 years ago after cleaning up a near-miss export control violation, was Clause 9A, a little line most people skipped: reinstatement of RoRo status must be willingly initiated by the existing RoRo. If deemed unwilling or unresponsive, reinstatement is locked for 6 calendar months. 6 months. That's not a pause. That's a death sentence in the world of government contracts. And if I went on record, even just once, as unwilling to return, the system would flag the RO seat as frozen. No overrides, no proxies, no backdoors, just silence and fallout. So I sat with that silence, drank it in, let it fill the space where anxiety used to live. Because for 15 years, I'd worked through holidays, weekends, disaster recoveries. I'd put out fires I didn't start. I'd saved deals by catching compliance clauses hidden like landmines. I'd protected this company from the consequences of its own arrogance. And they thanked me with a cardboard box and a speech about refreshing talent. Well, here we were, talent refreshed, contracts can-led, shares sliding like ice down a hot windshield. And I finally felt steady, untouchable. Monica followed up once. 2 hours later, he's serious. Said he'll meet wherever, whenever, wants to apologize. I didn't answer because apologies aren't signatures and reinstatement. That requires something else entirely. Willingness. And I wasn't there yet. By Tuesday, the spin cycle had burned out, and desperation started to seep through the cracks in their $500 chairs. At 9:03 a.m., I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. Some intern or executive assistant with a double-barreled last name, clearly tasked with outreach after the So White realized they'd flamed every bridge on the map. The subject line: reinstatement proposal temporary assignment. The body read like it had been chewed on by legal PR, a panic attack. We'd like to formally extend an invitation for you to rejoin the company in a transitional capacity as responsible officer to assist with system restoration and facilitate the resolution of ongoing regulatory matters. Duration 60 days. Compensation: current salary plus 20%. We hope to rebuild trust and collaborate in good faith. No apology. No acknowledgement of the public firing. No mention of the fact that they tried to forge my damn signature 72 hours ago. Just 60 days, a band-aid over a bullet wound. I didn't reply. 5 hours later, the COO reached out directly. She was always more polished than the CEO, NBA slick with a voice like a podcast host and the emotional range of a dead goldfish. She called from a blocked number. Left a voicemail. "We're offering a consulting contract. Triple your previous pay. Work remotely. Full discretion. Just a few key signatures and reports. In exchange, we ask for confidentiality. Strict NDAs. We can make this clean. Easy. Easy. That word landed like a paper cut across my MERS. I'd worked 15 years cleaning up their messes and now they wanted easy. I waited a full day before responding. And when I did, I didn't speak to her. I forwarded the voicemail to my lawyer and had him draft a formal response. Client is open to engagement discussions contingent upon receipt of the full proposed terms in writing. Note, all communications from this point forward must include legal counsel. 15 minutes after my attorney hit send, the COO called again. This time, she didn't leave a voicemail. That night, the company's internal Slack logs leaked to a private Discord channel for current and former employees. Someone shared a redacted board summary, supposedly a draft sent out by mistake. It wasn't flattering. Revenue projections had collapsed. Another $6 million contract was in suspension pending review. The government had flagged their subcontractor relationships for deeper audit. One director had already tendered resignation. 2 others were being evaluated for governance oversight failure. And buried halfway through the memo like a blood clot behind a smile. Resolution hinges on securing our row cooperation. Current stance non-responsive. Recommendation. Offer retention premium. Seek legal containment if necessary. Legal containment. They wanted to contain me. I printed that page not for proof but for pleasure. Framed it next to my desk, right between my mug that says coffee first, chaos later, and the certificate I earned back in 2014 for catching a billing fraud scheme before it triggered an IRS inquiry because that was always the game. I built the guardrails. I signed the risk matrix. I patched the holes before the auditors came sniffing. I saved this company from its own greed and hubris more times than I can count. And they thought I'd fold for 3 times the pay and a fresh coat of silence. No, this wasn't about helping. This was about leverage. And leverage doesn't come from lifting. It comes from position. So, I let them sweat. Every hour I didn't respond cost them 6 figures. Every minute I stayed silent, dragged the CEO closer to the gallows. The board had started constructing behind closed doors. They weren't offering me a lifeline. They were asking for the privilege of not drowning in the mess they made. I hadn't decided yet if I'd toss them even a brick. They sold it as a collaborative discussion. That's what the email said. Short, neat, dripping with performative civility. We believe a direct good faith conversation will allow all parties to move toward resolution. Translation. We're bleeding out and need you in the room before the patient flatlines. I told them I'd consider it, which was my way of saying I'd show up when I was good and ready. And when the day came, I didn't hurry. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. I walked in at 10:23. Not a dramatic entrance, no slamming doors or clicking heels. Just quiet steps into a boardroom stuffed with too many suits. The air so thick with tension it could have been cut into profit shares. The CEO was mid-rant when he saw me, his voice pitched high from hours of trying to mask desperation with aggression. He stopped mid-sentence, eyes narrowing, then launched straight into me. You have no idea the damage you've caused. Contracts, jobs, shareholder value. This he didn't get to finish because the company lawyer, buttoned up, pale as printer paper, stood so quickly his chair screeched across the polished floor. He reached out and grabbed the CEO's forearm like he was about to pull him away from an open flame. Sir, stop. The room froze. Then in a voice that was low but carried to every corner of that glass-walled chamber, he said the words that shifted the ground under every pair of Italian loafers and loud heels in the room. She's the only one who can sign the reinstatement. Not one of the only. Not our best option. The only. Every head turned to look at me. Not at my face, at my hands. Hands they now understood were the sole bridge between them and the compliance gridlock devouring millions of dollars an hour. I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just set my bag on the table slow enough for the sound of the leather to be heard in the silence. Then I opened my notebook, clicked my pen, and began writing. Not a word for them, but for me. Let them wonder if it was notes. Let them stew on whether it was a list of demands or a record for the feds. CEO's mouth opened. But the lawyer shook his head once, sharp. Anything you say right now can be construed as coercion. We are past the point of negotiation without her willing consent. The phrase hung there, willing consent, like the blade of a guillotine, dangling but steady. I let my gaze sweep the room, directors shifting in their seats. The COO staring at the table like she'd find salvation in the wood grain. The CFO tapping his pen too fast. Eyes darting toward the clock on the wall, probably calculating how much this very minute was costing them. And me, serene, because they'd finally caught up to what I'd known from the moment I pressed submit in that elevator. I held every card, and they were just now realizing they weren't even at the table unless I let them sit down. I didn't speak until every eye in that room had landed on me twice, once out of shock and once out of the quiet, choking recognition that they had no other way out. Then, without preamble, I reached into my bag, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the glossy table. 3 bullet points. That's all. 7-figure payout wired within 48 hours. Full benefits reinstated retroactively. Health, retirement, stock options backdated to the day they fired me. The CEO's immediate resignation effective before the ink on my reinstatement dried. A wiggle room. No subject to discussion. Just facts in black ink. And then the last line written in my neat block print. Failure to agree will result in official written notice of unwillingness to return per Clause 9A. This will lock reinstatement for 6 months, non-negotiable. I leaned back in my chair. Your choice. The CEO sputtered, the beginnings of some insult curling in his throat, but the lawyer cut him off like a scalpel to a nerve. She's right, he said, voice flat, resigned. Clause 9A locks the designation if she's unwilling. There's no court, no agency, no emergency appeal that can override it. Not for 6 months. Silence. The kind that eats sound out of the air. I watched them weigh it. The money they'd lose in half a day versus the money they'd have to wire to me in one lump. Humiliation of losing their golden boy CEO versus the humiliation of explaining to shareholders why their contracts were still dead in the water. The CFO's pen stopped tapping. The COO finally looked up. The board chair leaned forward, eyes fixed on my paper like it was the last lifeboat off a sinking ship. Get it done, the chair said. The CEO opened his mouth, but the chair's stare nailed him in place. Now, I didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just reached into my bag again, pulled out my own pen, a heavy silver one I'd bought years ago after my first big compliance win, and signed the reinstatement forms with the same com I'd used to trigger the stop work order in the first place. No flourish, no speech. I set the pen down, stood, and slid the signed document back toward the lawyer. Then I walked out. Not a glance behind me. Not a word to anyone, just the sound of the boardroom door clicking shut, sealing them inside with the consequences I'd handed them and the vacuum I'd left behind. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.